Hey there guys, it's Metro. Today we are back with my main man Cop, who's a little under the weather today, but we're dedicated to this, so we're going to get back to Shrine in the Storm, new player guide, Mythic Plus pugging. And this one's actually been recommended by a viewer, Pitbull1975, so we're going to get this out of the way for him, as he had a lot of questions about Shrine, and I think you probably have a lot of questions as well, right Cop?
Yeah, I think I did this one once for that quest chain where you get the eyeball on your head, and that was about it. And I didn't even make it to the end because I got lost and died in the water on the way to the final boss.
Okay, well that sounds about right. The funny part about this is we actually just came out here and Cop realized that there was a flight path here for the first time.
Yeah. Noob.
Well, that's why we're doing it. So let's get started here because this dungeon's got a lot of weird things going on in it. And yet another dungeon that's really going to synergize really poorly with a couple of fixes. Right out of the gate, you're going to see these Tide Sage Initiates. They're very low health mobs. Even on 0, they only have 100k health compared to that Templar who's there as well with 604k health. So yeah, about the 5 of them there is, but 6 of them is going to add up to the health pool of the Templar, meaning things like sanguine, things like busting, things like explosive can cause a lot of havoc in these early rooms, but more so it's going to be even more problematic later in the dungeon. But the main thing you'll notice though here is that these mobs actually run, which yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of. You might be able to tell that from the previous videos, but I mean, it certainly makes things harder. The reason I have some problems with this is because I don't feel like the game, when mobs used to run, like in the first 2 expansions especially, there was ways that you could deal with that, like ways you were expected to deal with that, and the dungeon was built around that. But now it just seems like it's there to just make it harder because these mobs are going to run. There's nothing really you can do here. I mean, you can pull them back into this hallway, I guess, but it's going to be a much bigger problem later on and in other dungeons too. But so anyway, yeah, let's go ahead and just we'll clear this out. You'll see here, this will be basically what you want to do. You want to try to get this pack without the Templar. You can actually skip the Templar, and in the past seasons, I would like to do this, especially in Season 2, because of just how reaping timing played out. I wanted to make sure we got a reap at an exact moment, and that was needed to skip the Templar. So basically, as long as, he pats away, you can just run right by him. Something to think about here, though, is if you do skip him and the inevitable deaths that happen throughout the dungeon occur, and people have to run back, very likely that somebody's going to end up aggroing that Templar. So it's really not a problem if you fight him at all. We're going to do so now just so I can show you a little bit of his skill set. He's got about 3 abilities, and one of them is extremely important. It's basically, it's going to make everything around them, here it is, Protective Ore. It's going to make everything around them take about, I think it's like a 40% reduction. And then there's this Heaving Blow as well, which you need to dodge, and then the Idle Surge. So there's a couple mechanics. Things that you could interrupt. As you see, another buff on him. Damage done increased by 25%. Haste increased by 25%. So basically this mob is just going to be like a buff. It's kind of like a paladin, really. Templar, its name. And it's going to really augment the pack, that whatever pack it's in. The first time you encounter one, it's very benign. It's not really dangerous at all, unless it's bolstering. But later on, it's going to get a lot more complicated. So here we have another pack that used to be really devastating. In fact, this used to give busting and all the stuff that now has been removed from yellow mobs. It doesn't work that way anymore, luckily. But this pull here used to be an absolute nightmare. And I think it does still drop sanguine. But other than that, it's just nothing really to worry about anymore. So you can actually split pull those from the yellows if you want. Easy enough as a blood decay. You can just death grip and then interrupt the other one, and they'll both come running here. But most people usually take this as a great opportunity to go pad mode, as they say, trying to get as much DPS in as possible. And as you see, the main mechanic they do is that wash away. That's actually another incredibly important mechanic that's going to come into play in a little bit. But let's talk a little bit about it now. Basically, it just puts a little blue swirl on the ground. You get hit by said blue squirrel, you take a good amount of frost damage, and you're going to get knocked back. And the knockback is actually probably going to end up being way more important than the damage, because there's a lot of very difficult to navigate situations coming up here. So you get hit by those into another pack, and that could absolutely ruin your run. But anyway, usually people will pull those yellows, not a big deal. At this point, you want to definitely try to isolate one of these mobs. Even though there's only one mob here, each of these mobs have a lot of dangerous casts. The Spiritualist is another one. Anchor Binding is something you probably don't need to worry about. Just, dodge mechanic. But the main here is, you're probably not going to see it here, but it's a heal, right? And this is a very, very, very dangerous heal. It's actually, it's called like, Mending Rapids, that's right. It looks similar to a monk ability, but it can be purged. It's basically, she casts it and then she puts this insane hot on every single target in the pack. So if that happens and you could purge a couple of them, you're going to want to do that. Otherwise, you just absolutely need to interrupt. And that plus this mob here, basically, if this mob gets the protective aura off and that mob gets the heal off, the mobs are going to laugh at you. They're not going to die no matter what the difficulty it is. So yeah, you just still have a lot of interrupts here. This is interrupt the dungeon, frankly. And luckily, as a Mistweaver or as a Windwalker cop, you're in really good position here. But it's also just kind of like some of the other dungeons we did where, you know, interrupting the wrong thing isn't always it's a big mistake at times. Let's put it that way. Like, for example, these attendants coming up again, or the ones with the knockback, if you interrupt their cast, it might be a good idea, but it's a move, like you could just move from it. You know what I mean? The knockback is not actually dangerous. You can just move from it. Realistically, their actual rotational cast is far more dangerous, especially given some of the tank meta that we've seen in the last 2 seasons. They're going to get hit really hard on certain keys. So, you know, these are the things you got to think about. When and what am I going to interrupt? And it has to happen. You can't not. Let's put it this way. This is a dungeon that if you come in with a 3-range DPS comp, you're probably not going to be able to. And you might not even be able to finish the key. Because the 2nd and 4th boss are so interrupt heavy that not having adequate interrupts, like you would need to have absolute perfect play to say, like, if you had like 3 bombkins, you know what I mean? Something with very long CDs on their interrupt. You probably, I don't know if you could even do the last boss, honestly. It would be very difficult. Now this pack here is another complicated one, and this is where people get a little fancy here with snapping. I'm not going to describe that in this video because I don't support it, and I don't really like its purpose at all, but it is basically going to just be a better version of Corphine's Grasp. If you really want to do it, you can. You can look into that on your own, but for me, it's easy. I just Corphine. You could also interrupt. So as you see, the wash away, you know, it's not doing anything. I can just move. So instead, I'm going to interrupt the water blast instead, which is going to do much more damage to me as a tank. But yeah, obviously 2 casters in this pack. One of the main problems people run into all the time here is those 2 mobs are pretty close to that living current. I've actually had this happen to me a couple times recently as well. You'd be fighting these 2 casters, and you're already thinking ahead because these next packs are going to get really brutal, and you're kind of complacent. If you get knocked into that living current, you're going to be no longer complacent. You're going to be looking for a new group. Let's put it that way. You do not want to pull this mob by accident, and it happens all the time. So if there's any way you could circumvent it as a tank or group in general, you're going to want to do it, other than obviously just move from the mechanic. You want to, at least if somebody gets knocked back, they won't get knocked back into that. So fighting them like right here, right in front, is definitely a no-go. You don't ever want to fight them right where they stand because that's definitely going to aggro. Like I said, you'll want to pull them back up at least to the stairs, and that's easily done as a Death Knight because grip and ranged interrupt, but otherwise, you know, you could use ring, any type of stun or anything just to prevent them from knocking people back. It's kind of your main goal. And it's the same thing here. We're going to have, I guess it's on teaming weeks that there's a Templar here, but a lot of people like to kind of, they like to fight a lot of trash in the corner here. I guess probably for the same reason as you see another Spiritualist on that side there. And if you aggro those mobs by accident somehow, I mean, you made a really big mistake if you did that, but either way, that's pretty bad. Aggroing extra trash in here is really, really bad because there's going to be an absolute ton of casts that you're going to need to interrupt. So here we're actually seeing a perfect, segue into this next pack. This is a really complicated pack because it's got those 2 casters and it's got a living current, which is probably one of the most dangerous mob types in here, if not the most dangerous besides the mini bosses. And as you see, the Templar has patrolled into it. Now that Templar is going to patrol between this pack and the next pack. We definitely do not want to fight it with either if we can avoid that. It's complicated to do, but it's worth it if you can get it to happen. That was probably the worst case scenario, though. We had to wait almost 20 seconds for that patrol. Now let's talk about the living current really quick. It doesn't do a lot, but it does one main thing, and it's going to be really, really, really bad. And there's not really any way most people could deal with it. Basically, it puts you in an absorb bubble. It throws you up in the air, stuns you, and then slams you out on the ground. You're going to take damage from the knock up in the air. You're going to take damage from the falling, okay? As a Death Knight, you have 3 different ways to deal with this mechanic, and you want to make sure you're using them if you're on, any dangerous fortified week. All three of these abilities are going to negate at least half of the mechanic. Death's Advance is going to negate the knock-up portion, meaning you won't take fall damage. Anti-magic shell is going to negate the magic stun, which means you're going to still get knocked up in the air, but you'll take fall damage, but you won't take the magic damage. And then Icebound Fortitude is also going to prevent the stun, so it means you're only going to take the fall damage, which is definitely, it's about 50-50 really. So what I like to do is I like to Death's Advance plus AMS in the first one, so I just take 0 damage, literally don't take any damage from the mechanic. And usually by the time the second one happens, if I don't have Icebound up, it doesn't really matter because the pack's dead. It doesn't have that much health compared to the attendants, and as long as people are ready for it, it usually dies pretty quick. But what I like to do here is I like to grip the far one, and then taunt the current up here, fight him along the side. The main reason you want to do this is because range can actually line of sight this. There's multiple places you can line of sight it. A lot of people will use the stairs here, or they could take him over by the rocks and then use this part here. But as you see, AMS plus Death's Advance, I'm just down here, cops up in the air, and that's that. Mechanic avoided, you know what I mean? So it's really good as Death Knight. All 3 specs of Death Knight can do this. They all have these 3 spells, and yeah, it should be fine. So again, these water blasts are actually going to be low-key dangerous as hell. They're going to be much more dangerous than people think, and you really, if you're a damage dealer in this pack, you want to make sure you're interrupting those mobs, because if you don't, your tank's probably going to get taken a ton of damage. And especially if he's not a Death Knight, or really if he's not somebody who could deal with magic damage in general, he honestly, that might be the most dangerous pack in the game for him. So what we're also seeing here is the Templar extending exactly as we want him to, patrol wise, so we get him without any concern whatsoever. And a lot of the times I like to pull him with these yellows. Not really a big thing, but somebody usually ends up aggroing them anyway, so I've kind of just gotten in the habit of pulling them. They don't do anything, like I said, as long as it's not, I think Sanguine they still do, but other than that, that's good. Now here we go. This is another really complicated pack. It's got 2 Spiritualists, which are again the healing mobs, and it's got the Attendant, which is just the caster mob with the knockback. But Spiritualists are again a very, very, very important target, because if they get the heal off, the mobs are probably going to out heal your damage. And if you have a Death Knight, or I mean if you have a Demon Hunter, something with basically a Blood Elf, anything that could purge, you can get these mechanics off. It's not the end of the world. But if you fail to interrupt and fail to purge, you're probably just going to end up sitting here for another full 2 minutes, maybe 1 minute, depending on what level the key is. It's not a good thing. Let's put it that way. So this pack is actually 100% skippable, and I'm going to show you exactly how. Okay. Basically, it's actually a little bit harder than it looks. So I'm putting a marker down at the very bottom of the stairs. You see that, Cop?
Yep.
Okay, so if you're to the right of that marker with respect to where we are now, you will aggro this pack. That's more important than it looks, because in order to get past the wall, you have to go right there. You know what I mean? So you're going to be very close to Skull if you're going to do this. So the way I like to do it is I like to make sure I like to aim right here. I put a purple marker right on that rock formation, okay? I like to land on the rock formation and then jump against the wall. As you see, very easy. I'm not anywhere too far right, and then just kind of run against the wall and go right by, okay? Now you can do, oh, well, Cop failed already, so let's go ahead and wipe and try that again. This is going to be very, very, very important. If you fail this, you are probably, yeah, that's not good. So die, jump off, and try it again. Get some practice in here. If your group wants to do this and you fail it, you're going to be in world of hurt. Let's put it that way. People are going to be very upset with you.
Sorry, I went past the purple and got stuck in the wall.
Yeah, perfect. So there you go. So practice that. We're going to get some practice here. Now, this is a pack that a lot of people just pull anymore, but I still like to skip it because there's easier count elsewhere. Let's put it that way. It's not as dangerous as I make it sound, but if you have good interrupts, it's really nothing at all compared to some of the later packs. But it's just the pug mentality, man. Nobody wants to interrupt, and everybody's going to burn their interrupt on like something stupid. They might not even, literally, you might miss both heals on both targets. So that's GG. So go ahead and try again. Land on purple and then just run into red. There you go. You skip purple, you're good. So just kind of smash your face into red until you're past the mechanic. There you go. You did it. So the boss is there. But let's go ahead and pull the trash, because like I said, a lot of times people pull this anyway. And let's give you a little bit of look at what it's like, because even on 0, it's going to be kind of difficult, especially with just 2 people. We're going to have to do a lot of interrupting and deal with a lot of mechanics. So also, you kind of want to make sure you get these yellows away. Now, another thing about skipping this pack, okay, that one. Yeah, there's the second one. Cop, get that one. All right, good, got it. Okay, perfect. Anyway, so yeah, 2 casts there, kind of back to back. It's gonna be a lot more dangerous, obviously, on a real key, and it could be very, very, very bad if you mess that up. Now, of course, if the Templar is here too, then you're in a little bit of a trouble because you're probably gonna have to wait for him to patrol at least back up the stairs. If he does, you want to let him get right about here. You'll be, obviously further up the stairs. Basically, when he's right there, you can pull him. Otherwise, if he's down the stairs at all, he has a risk of aggroing the yellows with him. I've seen that happen a time or two, and then they'll aggro the rest of the pack. Now, these yellows are also kind of a problem. You don't want to fight them with the boss. And again, certain fixes. Actually, boss in that. No, maybe not. Yeah, I think I did. Well, that's fine. Let's jump off again, and we'll talk about the boss. Because what I want to show is before pulling the boss, there's actually a little bit of time gain that you could make by pulling another pack to the right. So we didn't see it because of the way we approached the dungeon here today, but there's actually a little bit of RP between when you get close to the boss and when you first engage him. Basically, when you get close to those yellow mobs, the boss is going to start like a little bit of a 30 second or so RP, and it's going to take a little bit to get him up. So instead, what I like to do is I like to grab these apprentices and grip them up here. We're going to get these yellows as well, obviously. And then we're going to drag them up here because even as a Death Knight, you're going to have some trouble making sure they're not sat there casting. Kind of just sit there, do whatever they like. So just get them here. These mobs, they put this little, I don't know, this, like a typhoon thing down. It's not as dangerous as it might appear. I don't know. Obviously move out of it, but these mobs are pretty straightforward. Just interrupt them if you can. Otherwise, move. Pretty straightforward. Okay, now this boss is the Noob Buster. This is a very, 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 very easy encounter compared to most in here. Certainly the easiest, and it's got really only one mechanic, and if you do it wrong, you're dead. You're gonna get knocked off the platform. Don't get knocked off the platform. This happens all the time. He does a charge. The thing about the boss, go ahead and click the boss now, and you see his giant red ring of a hitbox. You see that giant red ring around him?
Oh, yeah.
That's a really big hitbox, meaning you have to be outside of that to make sure you're not hit by his charge. So it's harder than it looks, but it's still very, very easy mechanic. He's just always going to charge the direction he's facing. So you just look where he's facing, and the tentacles kind of give it away. The tentacles are kind of flapping in the breeze. If you see how they're kind of under his chin, and they're flapping the like exact direction he's going to charge. So just look at that if you're kind of confused. Also, if you guys have never noticed, whenever you target a mob, there's a little bit of a kind of like a little triangle on the, you see that triangle directly in front of the boss on the hitbox? I
do.
Yeah, so that's also an indication of which direction he's facing. A lot of people maybe don't know that, so I just wanted to bring it up. But anyway, it's a great target for lust. You're going to want to lust on the pull. A lot of people like to lust after the ads. He basically splits into 3 targets. When that happens, you need somebody in melee range of all 3 of them. Otherwise, they're going to cast just a random cast at a target, and it's usually not going to be the tank. So his actual melee attack does almost nothing compared to that. That cast is extremely dangerous. So you, especially Cop, as melee, you're going to just want to make sure that you're, like if there's 3 people, try to be at one by yourself effectively. Don't be standing next to another melee at one unless you see the other 2 are already covered. Usually a tank will get 1, healer will get 1, and the DPS will get the 3rd. 3 DPS on 1 is not a problem when that's happened like that, but obviously you want to try to burn 1. There's 3, you want to get all 3. Don't want to have all 3 up for very long. Let's see the fight. There's some other mechanics, but frankly I think they're so inconsequential I won't even burden anybody with them. They're basically healer mechanics, and they don't really do anything. You'll see them here, and I'll just happen, but for the most part this fight is extremely straightforward. The choking brine is one of them. Basically going to put a dispellable debuff on it. It's going to slow the person substantially, and that's kind of a problem on this fight because you do have to do a bit of moving. So there's the surging rush. So you see which direction he's facing, and yeah, perfect. We dodge it, no problem. Now the thing about that debuff that Cop has on him currently is if he gets dispelled, it's then going to put a bunch of blue swirls on the ground, and those blue swirls are going to, if they get soaked, you're going to get the debuff as well. So obviously just move out of that if he gets dispelled. Undertow is a very easy mechanic as well. You're just going to get pushed back. And Erupting Waters is the name of the mechanic that summons the 3 ads. So Cop's going to go there. I'm going to see. Sadly, we only got 3 people. We don't have 3 people, I mean, so it's killing. But about 20 seconds in his phase, he's going to do another set of mechanics. There's another choking brine combo. And then also the charge is going to happen. Here we go, Surging Rush. So this is when it gets really complicated. Cop's actually already killed one, so that's good. And there you go, boom. Top got hit, he would be dead, and that would be a battle res used there. So gotta be really, 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 really ready for that, because if you get hit, at that point you will die for sure. And unless it's not, you know, maybe like a really low key, you will die for sure there, and that's a battle res. And a lot of the times you're gonna get knocked off as well. Now, there's also these tentacles. They actually are just some mobs, so you can like stun them and break them immediately. You could druid shift out of them. You could use freedom. There's dozens of ways to deal with it. Very, very, very easy. But the main thing, it's a noob buster fight, guys. If you get hit by that charge, you die. If you dodge the charge, there's zero mechanics in the fight that you're gonna have to worry about. So you just want to be careful. Like, it's really dangerous. Actually, maybe we should talk a little bit about why, because it happened so quick you probably didn't realize it. So let's put the markers down. I'm going to show you exactly what happened there. There was one at Skull. Okay, there was one at this is a very common formation as well. I think it's random, but a lot of the times you see them in this exact formation. Okay, so there's 3 targets: Skull, Red, and Blue. All right, so and now the thing is, they don't always just go directly forward from where they are. A lot of the times they're going to turn. So for example, the mechanic happens, and probably the ideal situation would be to go, if from Skull it went to over here. Okay, Red it went to here as well. Okay, so then you can kind of AoE them down. And usually if that happens, then Blue is kind of going to go here. Okay, that should be the easiest one to dodge. From Skull to the new Skull, and from Red to the new Red, means you can kind of just stay here. Kind of just look where all 3 are, and there should be a very wide swath of land that's not going to be covered. So it becomes problematic when they're all going in similar directions, like across from each other. So again, the 3 colors are here, and they're all going to go kind of in 90 degrees from where they started. So the Red will go from Red over to here. A really common one. Blue, it's going to go from there to over there, and Skull, it's going to go from there to over here somewhere. Okay, this is another common one where they're right next to each other and you can kind of click down, but that's probably the most dangerous one because you got them kind of crossing all through the middle, and at that point you just got to be ready. You got to be looking around, you got to keep your head on a swivel, see all 3 of them, know exactly where is safe. And, you know, if push comes to shove, just use an immunity. Just use a big defensive, so if you do get hit, you might survive. And make sure you're not near the edge. It happens all the time where somebody's here. Like, they'll be fighting Red right here, and then they don't see Blue coming through them, and they'll get knocked off the side here. You get knocked off the side. If you land on these rocks, you can get battle res. You get knocked off the side here, you're not coming back. Let's put it that way. So, no more battle resing. Okay. So that's the first boss, straightforward encounter, really nothing to it. Now this is a really interesting trash pack again, especially on some of fixes. So stay back, I'm going to show you something that you should be able to do. It's difficult to pull off at times, but this should work 100% of the time. Basically what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get close enough to these initiates that they're going to split pull without aggroing the wind speaker. And this is really important on bolstering. This dungeon is another nightmare dungeon on bolstering because there's a lot of small mobs around one really dangerous mob, and this pack especially is the worst one because there's not really too many options. There is things you can do with Warlock Gates and Rogue. Obviously, if you have 2 Rogues, you can Shroud here. Otherwise, you're going to want to save your Shroud. But now, what you should be able to do here is just kind of hug the side here, and just don't follow me, Cop, just in case I messed up. But yeah, I'm just going to hug the side here and kind of get right up to about here. And as you see, I failed it. So let me jump off and see if I could do it again. I have a lot of trouble replicating this at times, and I don't really know why, but that's what you should do. Unless they fixed it, that's how it should work. I've had it work that way every time. Basically, just hug the side there, and it should aggro only the 4 mobs and not the big mob. You're probably going to want to practice it yourself, regardless of me showing it to you. It's harder than it looks, and if you can get it 100%, which even I'm not able to do a lot of times, it's going to make a big difference in some weeks. Okay, so. Practice it at home. You know, if you guys are here, come on normal, just try it. It's nothing special. But yeah, basically you just want to come on this rock here. And yeah, I successfully did it that time. So I think that the problem I did last time was I was too close to the middle. Instead, I kind of ran around the edge of this rock, whatever the square pillar is. Instead, you kind of want to run to the left of the rock. But as you see, literally just non-elites killed them. And now you've isolated the pack. I think it'd probably be a lot easier to skip this too. Maybe with the rogue you can skip it, just track. But it's not skippable just by running, as you see. So either way, you're probably going to want to pull this mob. In Season 3, they made it do a lot. They give a lot more count. And if you're going to skip other stuff in here, you're not going to be able to skip as much here. So this is the only real mechanic it has. It puts down this little AoE circle thingy that buffs anybody who's in it. But damage dealers like Cop, you're going to want to stand in that if you can. Gives a massive haste buff. Ideally, the tank will keep it close enough so the DPS get attacked from it. But you obviously got to move her out of it. It's going to make her do a lot more damage. And then she does that Gale wings, and it does a ton of AoE. Okay, so you're going to have to get through that. Really difficult on a Grievous week, something like that. But otherwise, yeah, just get through it. It's nothing, not a big deal at all. But again, if you bolster that mob 4 times, probably just going to die there. Honestly, it'd probably be faster to just, at that point, just wipe. Because there's no way your healer's going to keep you up for like 4 or 5 of those casts. And it's just faster to die and run back. Another tip about that mob is that the first Gale Winds cast is followed. It follows. Basically, she puts the ward down, and then she casts a spell, and then she casts the Gale Wind. The spell itself is interruptible. So basically, as soon as she puts that circle down, interrupt and move the boss. If you can do this, she will move out. But the first one, it's very difficult to move her out because there's almost no time in between the 2 mechanics. It's a lot easier with a monk tank, or I guess maybe a monk in general. Do you have the taunt that makes them the speed taunt, Cop? Do you have that as Windwalker?
The only taunt I have is provoke.
Yeah, I know, but does it say it makes
moves towards you at 50% increased speed. Yes, I did not know that did that.
There you go. Okay, so Windwalker, I assume Mistweaver as well can do it. Basically, what you're trying to do there is just get her to move a little bit faster, because a lot of the times, even if you do interrupt it, there's so little time in between the 2 casts, she won't move fast enough to get out of the ability. And this sounds like, you know, minor maximization, but it's a really, really big deal on a hard key. If she's in that, she's going to do probably about, 20 to 30% more damage with that ability. So, yeah, you really want to try to get her out of that if you can. All right, here's another great example about bolstering. These mobs can also be isolated, and you're just going to let them patrol to their apex and then taunt them, and they also will not aggro the Templars or the apprentices that are there. So, again, these initiates, that is, are going to be a big problem throughout this dungeon. But managing them well on a week where it's important is going to be more important than anything you can do, and otherwise you can just AoE them down. So these apprentices are also kind of dangerous mobs. Basically, they're like a tank mob. You do this Thundering Blow, it's going to see armor reduced by 10%. But this is really the problem, is Whirling Slam. It can be stunned, it's not a big deal. And they're also going to emulate the mechanics of the second boss that's coming up. But yeah, learn these mechanics now because it's going to be more important on the boss. But otherwise, I mean, even me, as long as you don't have multiple stacks of this armor thing or it's not getting too out of control, just stand in that mechanic. Not really that dangerous. Let the DPS deal with it. But as a DPS, you're definitely going to want to get out of that. It does a lot of physical damage. And this pack is a little eclectic. It's got kind of one of everything that we fought up into this point, and it can get pretty complicated because of that. Again, the attendant and the apprentice are going to need dedicated interrupts, and then the male. So basically, there's 2 different apprentices here. The Iron Hull male apprentice is going to do the big AOE that we just talked about, and then the other ones are going to be the casters. So let's take a look at what the pack. Don't do too much damage. Let's let them get a little cast up. Here's the big thing here is that mob is at range, so you're going to want to get it in, grip it in, especially. There's Wash Away on top of the frontal cleave, so you got to dodge 2 things at once. Whirling Slam on top of this Typhoon, dodge 2 things at once. This pack, like I said, it's a little eclectic. It's got a little bit of everything, and it's not very dangerous, but it's something that you're going to want to be aware of mechanically, because you're going to, oftentimes, like you see, you're going to be dodging like 2 to 3 things at once. That could be very difficult, especially as a tank play. It could be even worse as a melee DPS. It's ranged back, but that's it. So a little bit of a mechanically complicated pack, but not very dangerous. Now this next is another mini boss here, like we just saw in the previous one. It's got another rune mechanic it's going to do. Again, both of these are emulating the boss that's upcoming, and this one is a little bit. It's probably worse than the previous one because it takes a lot longer to die, and if you don't do the mechanic right, you're not going to die, but it's going to elongate the pack really substantially. So this is a really, really good time for your first Shroud here, just because this pack takes really long if you don't do it perfectly, and again, with certain affixes, it's going to be really bad. We're not going to skip it, obviously, but you definitely just want to Shroud, kind of hug the left here and go around the pillar there, very easy. But the reason it's a pain is because, first of all, these mobs run. So if they run over to that pack there, good luck on your next group, let's put it that way. And the best way to deal with that is just kind of pull them back. I like to kind of pull them into this hallway because then there's enough room to deal with the mechanics. Those are just the same non-elites, but the Rune Weaver is the big thing. He's going to put this green circle down. When you're standing in that mechanic, you take 75 or something like that reduced damage. And that's really, 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 really important because of this mechanic. Watch this. Hard Flesh, okay? So channels on a damage healer. Even on 0, it's absolutely destroying cop. My god, that is insane. So the way you have to, if you did not get into this green circle on Mythic Plus, you would just probably get killed in 2 ticks of it. Nobody's going to be able to heal you through that. So again, as a tank, just keep the mob as close as possible so there's no reason that the players can't be in it the whole time. They don't even have to move out of it. That's the best way to deal with it. But yeah, if you ever are fighting this pack and you get one shot, because you're not doing the mechanic properly, so just be aware. And that's why I say it's going to elongate the pack, because people die to this pack all the time just because they're not paying attention. Or another problem is the boss is in the 75% reduced damage. So if that mini boss is in that circle, he also takes 75% reduced.
Wow.
Yeah.
That hurt a lot.
So, what's that?
I said that hurt a lot.
Dude,
wow.
yeah, you almost died on 0. Like, that's nuts. Okay, so here we go. This is another really complicated pack. It's nothing new, so I'm not going to explain it, but just be aware that this could be one of the most dangerous packs in the game, in the dungeon, because a lot of tank mechanics and a lot of, again, AoEs that you're going to need to deal with. And especially on teaming, it gets a lot worse, let's put it that way. In teaming, there's another one of those healer mobs. But as you see, basically 4 move out of this mechanics at once. So if anybody didn't move out of those 4 things, they're probably not going to live. Let's put it that they're going to die. They're going to have 0 health. So let's keep that in mind. Even as a tank, I often overestimate my own self-sustain. And I'm like, dude, I'm blood DK. Watch me pimp, you know what I mean? And then I get crushed by that. So just be very careful. Here's another mini boss, and this one is also very skippable. The way people do it, and I'm going to show you here today. Cop, you're going to stand over at Skull, okay? I am going to pull the mob into this room, and then I'm going to die, and then you're going to run through. It's not going to work though because you're not a healer, but we're going to try it anyway. All right. So as soon as the mob gets to at the stairs right here, you see where I am currently. As soon as the mob gets to the stairs, you could run through, and then I will come back and die, quote unquote, and then you would res me. Basically, what you want to do as the healer. This only works for healer, by the way, because DPS won't be able to res. They'll be out of line of sight. You want to get to over there, basically, or anywhere in that area. You guys can figure it out yourself. It's not that complicated. Just get somebody over there and res. But yeah, we're just going to practice it, and then I think we'll probably kill the bomb, because I don't know if it'll be able to kill me. But either way, I'm going to run up here, and it's almost clear. Okay, you're good to go, Cop. Go ahead and go. Get to, yeah, see you right early. But either way, that's how you would do it, okay? It's pretty straightforward. Easy as a rogue, too, if you have a rogue, so let's just kill it. Easy as a rogue, you can just run and vanish, and it's not too big of a deal. But as you see here, this mob is also doing a ton of damage. A very dangerous mob, so it's a good idea to skip it if you can play that 100%. The main thing it does here is a Shipbreaker Storm. This is actually line of sightable if you did Court of Stars in Legion. Very easy to line of sight it. Just hide behind one of these pillars. Normally you'd fight it on this bridge here, so you would just hide like this. And the other thing here is this magic debuff that's on Cop. It's dispellable. So if you're the healer, you need to get it off immediately. Otherwise, that is that. You die. You cannot survive that. Go key. It needs to dispel the second it goes out, pretty much. Electrifying Storm. Nice thing is it's a magic, so if for some reason you have to solo this as a blood DK, you can easily just AMS it and then nothing. But as you see here, line of sighting the damage. I'm still taking damage from the dot, but not from the actual mechanic. And that's that. So yeah, pretty straightforward. It's not actually that difficult. Just does a lot of damage. You have to line of sight, so it means you're going to take a little bit longer to kill it. And otherwise, just on the healer pretty much. Yeah, good, decent idea to skip it on a hard week, and a little bit, yeah, it's a little bit tricky though, so just be ready. Now, a lot of times people are combining these pulls here, and it depends a lot on the emissaries. Basically, fighting these 5 mobs together is just kind of like the previous pack. You know, it's not any more dangerous than that. So if you did the previous pack, no problem, then you should be able to do this too. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. We're just gonna combine here, nothing dangerous. So it's the same mobs that we've been fighting the whole time, and it's a really good opportunity to use CDs. Probably the last big CD pack you'll use before the boss. Definitely want to make sure you're ready for the boss, but again, it's just more of the same. So Cop actually backed into Initiate, so that would be an absolute disaster on bolstering. As you see, this is where things get really complicated with bolstering and other fixes that are similar to it, because there's a lot of non-elites here. There's probably, I think there's 6 packs total of non-elites, and a lot of them are very, very close to where you're going to fight. So you gotta be ready for this. But luckily, most weeks it doesn't matter at all. These mobs are trivial. So there's also another pack of these elites that are going to be wandering around. And yeah, pretty common that you pull them together again with certain fixes. Doing that is going to be certain death. But you know, on a regular key, you shouldn't really fear this at all. Again, they're going to run though. Like I mentioned at the beginning, just make sure they don't run into even more mobs, and especially don't let them run into that pack. Now, a lot of times we're going to pull that pack just for count. It depends a lot on the week, and now especially with the affixes, the emissaries. But I don't know exactly what it's going to look like in season 4. Just be aware that that's nothing special over there. A lot of the times, before when I was talking about combining the pack, that patrol, it will patrol from one side to the other. It goes from that pack over there, to the one to the left, to the one to the right that we killed. So if it's on the left when you get here, just kill the left pack and skip the right pack. If it's on the right, kill the right pack and skip the left pack. But you probably, yeah, it's not a bad bet to pull these. Especially, let's put it this way, if you skip the pack that we were talking about before, pack I was showing Cop how to skip with the little jump there. If you skip that, you're probably going to want to pull this pack just to make sure. There's a lot of trash that you can get at the end, but ironically, it's some of the most complicated trash. It's a very high volume trash, and it does have one dangerous mechanic each, so if you want to fight it, you can, but I think it's honestly easier to just fight these kind of smaller packs. Let's put it that way. It invites less mistakes. So now a lot of the times I'm going to pull them this way so they run around the side here. It literally does not matter how you do anything here. It's completely, they're just non-elites. Literally just kill them. And if it's bolstering, give your healer some time to drink and get everyone topped off each pack. If it's sanguine, keep them moving. Don't let them stand still. Don't let them run into other packs. That's it. Just kill. I'd like to kill 2 packs at a time. Yeah, it's pretty, nothing really special here. But this is where you really got to step your game up now at this point. It's going to be, in my opinion, this is one of the hardest bosses in the dungeon, in the game, I mean. Because it is absolutely imperative that you interrupt, and if you don't, you get slaughtered. So a really often thing that happens here is you come here and you got about a minute left on Bloodlust. If that's the case, you're going to come, you're going to skip the boss. The boss can be reset easily, by the way. I'm just going to show you that now, just in case you pull him and you don't want to continue fighting him, or you pull him by accident. All he has to do is clear this outer ring, either of them, and they will reset. So watch, you'll see it here. As long as they get out of this inner ring, they instantly reset. See, clears the inner ring, reset. So very good. And you already see that debuff, Slicing Blast. So we'll talk about that again. Get there. But as you see, it's a stacking nature damage taken debuff. So really common to come here and pull this pack, so let's go ahead and do it. This has 4 mobs with it that don't really interact harshly with the mechanics in any way, but they have a shield. They basically have only 25k health on 0. They have a massive absorb, so if you're a demon hunter or, you know, a blood elf in general, you're going to want to deal with that. And the main thing here is this ability here, this unending darkness. What do you attack him? Yeah, so this unending darkness, it stacks up. Shadow damage increases by 10% per stack. So if you go, you know, 2 or 3 times without interrupting it, really bad. You're just gonna get slaughtered. Now, I guess what was happening there was Top had the other mechanic, the circle. Really not dangerous at all. Don't even bother with it. Make sure you're killing that mob as fast as possible. That mechanic does. It makes it look like you want to spread out. I mean, try, I guess, but doesn't really matter. Just make sure people are attacking that mob and killing it as fast as possible. Usually at that point, that 1 pack is all you need for Bloodlust. So let's get back and talk about Gale Caller Faye, who is going to be, yeah, she's going to be a brick wall for, I think, a lot of people. So basically, ideally, in my opinion at least, she would never get a single cast off. And that's it's harder than it sounds, because it happens often, first things first. And second problem here is that at one point, when you interrupt her, it causes another detriment. So I'm just going to go generally over the fight, because I don't think a lot of the gross anatomy of the encounter is very important. All I will tell you here is that you need to interrupt on this boss. And if you fail to interrupt on this boss, or you overlap interrupts constantly, you're just going to wipe here. There's no way any healer... Basically, if you never interrupted a single time, you would die probably 15 seconds into the fight. This fight is an interrupt boss. Literally, pretty much the only mechanic for DP. So you're going to want to get this weak ore that I have here, and hopefully a lot of people have by now. interrupt tracker weakcore. It's going to show you the CDs of everybody's interrupt. It's going to show you when they're available as well. And this is a no voice group here really. So we're talking about doing this without any real communication. A lot of times people might say, I'm going to get first. The way I like to do it is me as a Blood DK, I always get the first one on any boss like this, like we talked about in the Underrot, because I have a ranged interrupt. I can guarantee that I will get it the second she starts casting. And this kind of just, it's kind of like alleviates any mental mistakes that might happen where the first one goes off and everybody panics and 4 people interrupt at once. Just get that out of their heads. Don't let them do that. Just get the first one out of the way as a tank before they're still popping their CDs when it happens. Let's put it that way. So, anyway, good. Do a countdown, 5 seconds. Lust on 1, pot, pre-pot, and nuke the hell out of Gale Caller Faye. Don't do any intentional damage to Brother Ironhull. He is the easiest boss. Like, if it was just him, this would be a joke encounter. Gale Caller Faye, though, if it was just her, it would still be a very, very difficult encounter. It's the 2 of them together that make it complicated, though, because as you see, there's the runes from the previous mini bosses back on the encounter. The big blue rune, it's going to make her or anybody else get a massive haste increase. And the teal rune, the defense rune, it's going to make them take 75% less damage. Also, most importantly, it's going to clear any debuff you have on you. So every time you fail to interrupt, you get a stacking, I think it's 15% nature damage increase. So you fail to interrupt once, fail to interrupt twice, fail to interrupt third time, you're probably going to die, because now that third hit is going to do 30% more damage, and it happens fast. I'm talking about every few seconds. So yeah, basically every single cast should be interrupted. Or ideally, if you can't do that, every other cast. So you get hit by one, but it wasn't buffed. Then the buff, you have it, but you interrupt the next one, and by the time the next cast goes off, the first buff is gone. That's kind of like the gist of the encounter. If you interrupt every other ability, you're in good shape. But the problem is, long story short, she gets a buff throughout the encounter, and she is going to, when she gets interrupted, she's going to spawn these tornadoes. Now, these things are a real problem. They do just as much damage as anything on the encounter if you get hit by them, and they can be pretty difficult to dodge because they're a little bit dangerous. Kind of similar to second boss in Eternal Palace, a tornado like that, where it kind of just really big, kind of complicates the encounter. But one little pro tip I can give here is this ledge, the tornadoes cannot go on it, okay? So it's actually very possible to do this even with melee. If you tank the bosses right here, right in this corner, right where we aggroed, so let's test it out. But yeah, basically if you tank them right here, the tornadoes can't come here, and Cop, you'd want to stay on that ledge and fight up there. Not behind me, but on the ledge we were just on. And then no matter what, the tornadoes will never hit you. So, but as you see, we're actually getting our ass kicked by these casts already. So, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. If you want to do this, you can. It's not super reliable, but as ranged, you can just have people stand up there, and that's that. The other mechanic here, Brother Ironhull, is going to do that cleave. And yeah, let's just go and reset this. But yeah, he's going to do that cleave. It picks a player. People keep telling me that it only picks tanks. I'm not 100% sure if that's true or not. But yeah, if you see the boss doing the cleave and he's facing you, you get hit by it, you die. All right, so it's simple as that. This happens all the time with this boss, where you pull like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, pull. He does the cleave immediately, and somebody dies like 5 globals into the fight. So as melee, don't do that. Okay, let's put it that way. Like, make sure you dodge that mechanic, because if you get hit by it, you're gonna die. You're gonna die during bloodlust. That's gonna be cheeky. Yeah, let's. I guess we'll give it a try here. We had 9 stacks of the debuff, so that would have been a complete, absolute wipe. It's gonna be difficult to interrupt everyone, Cop. So I'm gonna get the first one, and then you get the second one, and then we'll see what happens after that. Okay, but yeah, just pop all offense on Gale Caller, and yeah, hopefully we'll kill her, and you guys will see a little bit of the flavor of the fight here, because this is a very complicated encounter. And I'll get the first there, and now you'll get the next. Okay, and there it is there. Okay, perfect. So now Blessing of Iron, that's his mechanic. Again, there's the cleave. Make sure nobody gets hit by that. And this is the next hit. We're going to have that one go off. This one's also going to go off, and then I will be able to interrupt after that. Again, while she's in that, she needs to be interrupted. So if you have no ranged interrupt, keep that in mind. Cop, you'll want to stand in that blue room to get a little bit of a debuff. Or a little bit, don't stand in it. Attack the boss with it is what I need to say, obviously. It gets a huge haste buff. So if you could attack the boss while you're standing in it, that is what you want to do. Okay, now we can actually clear our stacks. Go ahead and run into this, and you'll clear your stacks of that debuff as well. So if things got out of control, you can use that teal thing to clear your debuffs, and that's pretty good, obviously. So Another cleave, make sure you're dodging it, and another swiftness ward, so I'll get the interrupt as she's running. Perfect. Now again, you see this, whatever this is, Blessing of the Tempest being interrupted cause a blowback, creating a tornado at a nearby location. So there you go. So those are all the mechanics, and even as you see on a freaking 0, it's still extremely hectic. And yeah, make sure you're using that to clear your debuffs. Anytime you get hit by the cast, it's going to put that debuff on you, and if you get a bunch of them in succession, it's going to be very, very dangerous. So yeah, you can use that to clear it. It's pretty cool. It can also clear necrotic and stuff like that too, so that's pretty good. But anyway, the other big mechanic here is the tanking wise is that mechanic there. Basically, when he gets really, he gets enlarged, he does a ton of damage. It basically does like a ton more damage. So you can kite if you want, but at this point, I don't even feel like it's needed. So that's it. That's a very complicated encounter. It's kind of just a strategically complicated encounter. It's really not that hard mechanically, and it's just a numerical thing, and it's just a strategic thing. So if the strategy is there, if you interrupt every single cast, that boss is not hard at all. But that's a boss that I really hate fighting on Tyrannical weeks. Really, I think this dungeon is much harder on Tyrannical weeks than it is on Fortified weeks, because the bosses are just such pains. Here's another mob that's kind of interesting. Basically, he's going to do this mechanic that he's going to slam the ground, and everybody, you'll see it here, hopefully, I guess. Happen, I guess. There it is. Deep Smash is going to put these things under every single player. There's only 2 of us, but usually there'd be 5. You can actually kite this mob entirely. This is one of the few mobs in the game that still can be fully kited, like a Legion mob, where if the mob is not in melee range of somebody, he will not do his mechanic. So that's a pretty good idea there. You can just keep tread on them and kite them around in circles, then you never have to deal with it. Because that mechanic does do a lot of damage, and it's going to take a lot of effort out of the healing. So, but anyway, again, Unending Darkness, you need to make sure that's interrupted every single time as well. Just like the boss, if you get a couple casts off in a row, you are going to get killed by that mechanic. So, it can also be gripped. The mob can be gripped to interrupt its cast, as you see. That's that Void Seed that I was talking about before. Really not dangerous. You can spread out if you want, but it doesn't really matter. And again, 2 enforcers, like I said, I'll show you here. I can just keep thread on them and kite them. Rune weapon, get 2 blood boils, and then just run. You know what I mean? Obviously, if you have slow D&D, that's going to help, but don't even need it. They're not that fast. Stun them, knock them back, slow them, anything you got, and you see as soon as they catch up to me, they try to do the mechanics, so that's what I'm trying to avoid. Just trying to keep them at range of me so they never do the mechanic. And ideally, they would be slowed, so the DPS isn't just chasing them around for 10 minutes. Wait, it's not that big of a deal. If you fight them, just make sure both of them are doing it at the same time. You just move. It's always going to go under a player. And if you're in melee, there's going to be multiple players in the way, so you might run into somebody else's mechanic. Now here, these mobs transform this room into pretty much an anime, so it's a little scary at times. But you can actually pull them out. A lot of the times I like to pull them out. If you pull them out, the tentacles that are in that room don't actually, they won't be able to attack you, so it's a pretty decent idea. If you're really worried about this room, you can just pull them out, and you can interrupt. They do have one major mechanic that you want to interrupt, something like drowning, Rip Void also, I guess, but Rip Mind or whatever. But yeah, it's really just kill the mobs. It's not really touch of the drown. That's it. If you interrupt that, that's going to be in the best interest of the group. And then, yeah, like I said, this is a safe bet. You can just pull them out. All line of sight. Otherwise, these mobs can be stunned. We're going to fight these again coming up here in the future. But yeah, just stun them, interrupt them if you can. They just kind of lash this shadow damage, and again, it stacks. Damage taken increased by 54%. So this actually makes the whole room more dangerous. Could be a real problem for emissaries currently in season 3. There's a void emissary right here, so the best way to do it is then pull them out this way instead. So you can still actually do damage to the void emissary while line of sighting the casts and not taking a ton of damage there. But that's it. Okay, so now up here is definitely the hardest trash in the game. But what I mean is in the dungeon. And these first 2 mobs here, these cultists are gonna, when you fight them, they're gonna summon these giant tentacles who are absolutely, like, they're crazy. They do a ton of damage. And if somebody is not in melee range of them, they slap the ground for a ton of damage too. And that's pretty easy to be out of melee range of them because they spawn probably about 7 yards away from where the mobs are currently. So if you're not ready for them to spawn, yeah, you're gonna just get killed by them. So they're gonna slap immediately. So I would never pull this trash, honestly. I think even a death skip is better than pulling this trash, and that's saying a lot for me. Because dead count, really, it takes a long time to kill, and the pack after it is no better. It's a pack of 5 casters, and they all do the exact same mechanics. Basically, they do this void. It's kind of like a cone in front of them, and if you get hit by that, I think you get stunned. I don't actually know the mechanics because I fight them so infrequently. All I know is they stun, they do a ton of magic damage, and they're all casters. So unless you plan on fighting them where they stand, you're going to have a lot of trouble getting them where you. We're going to actually death skip it now to practice it. You could also invispot here, although it's a lot harder. Usually you're going to rogue skip. You almost want to bring a rogue to this dungeon just for those two skips. Skipping the second mini boss and then this pack here because it's really easy. Just mount up and shroud. But yeah, so what I'm going to do here is we're going to practice a death skip. I'm going to get to the end, build up runic power. Cop's going to get somewhere safe that he'll be able to. I'm going to battle res him. He's going to get somewhere safe. And then I'm going to battle res him after he dies, so you got to die first. Yeah, that's it. Pretty easy, pretty common. If you don't have a shaman, you could do this. So yeah, just try to get some threat on stuff so Cop dies first. And as a tank especially, you're going to want to survive. So there's that mental assault. As you see, does a ton of damage. Yeah, it did stun you. Yeah, okay, so if you get hit by that, you get stunned. So yeah, obviously, even on 0, it's a... Oh yeah, actually, you can see those tentacles. Somehow we've managed to like kind of get away from them. Kind of surprising, but also there's that drowning, does a ton of damage every second. Okay, so I got Cop battle res, don't take it until the mobs reset. I'm gonna die, and then he will he's gonna battle res me, and or he's gonna use a regular res on me, and then we will have skipped the pack. This is a really good way to do this. Again, it's gonna be a lot easier to do it when you don't have to wait a minute mobs to die. So you're good to take it. Go ahead and take it. Res me, and we hunky dory, as they say. We've skipped the pack now. Pretty often, if somebody dies here, you're in trouble because you're not going to be able to skip it again. So just really be careful with these next two packs because these packs are more dangerous than you think, especially when there's an emissary here. It's really dangerous. These mobs are just a ton of those tentacles that we saw in the previous room. They're not tentacles yet, but they're about to be. And yeah, shifting guys, it says. Something seems off. Couldn't agree more. So yeah, this is another great one for AMS. Just make sure you're mitigating as much magic damage as possible. And a really good time for Lake Sweep. This is a great time. You could stun about 8 of these, maybe 12 of these mobs if you position perfectly. That is going to reduce a ton of damage. You're getting the longer they're up, the more damage they're doing, the more damage you're taking. As you see, about 35 stacks of that. So you get 35 stacks of that on a Mythic 2, you'd be dead. Now, a lot of the times you're going to need both of these packs, depending on what we happened here would count. Not really a problem at all. One tip is as soon as you cross this threshold, though, it starts the RP for the boss. So if you are planning on fighting 2 packs, kill the first pack, cross the threshold, kill the second pack. If not, run through as you're fighting the first pack, start the boss RP, come back, and finish the pack. Otherwise, it's the third boss. This boss is a little bit more complicated than it looks, but if you're never doing really hard keys, it's probably one of the easier bosses in the game. The reason that's a problem is because the main mechanic on the encounter is a mind control, and it's probably going to wreak havoc on 0 here even, but the way you're supposed to deal with it is there's these black kind of purple orbs chasing each individual around. There'll be one per person. If they reach you, they stun you, deal about probably 25% of your health and shadow damage and stun you, which is more of a problem than it sounds like it is because then the other orbs that people are kiting might hit you as well and you might die to it. But more of the problem is that it means the mind control person can't hit them. The mind control person is supposed to run through all of them and take that damage instead of the player. And it's supposed to break the mind control. That would be how the game would work if it was made by competent developers. But for some reason, they've managed to mess it up on high keys. The mobs, the orbs themselves do the same. Like, they don't do a lot of damage. I don't know what to say. It does almost no damage. So if you're doing something like 18, 19, 20, even higher, it's probably worse. What happens is you soak the orbs, and they don't even do... Like, it just gets worse the higher the key you go, basically. Let's do the same amount of damage. If you're doing like a normal, like a 15 or something like that, this is not a problem at all. Just run through the orbs. It's going to break the mind control. That's that. Thing is, the first set, there's only going to be the 5 orbs you have. So if somebody accidentally hits one, it could be a problem. And if you broke all the orbs out and you still need to be broken, you still need to have more damage done to you, then you just have the players have to attack you. All right, this is another problem that happens on this fight is bad players don't understand this. They seem to think that it's not their responsibility, and if you get mind controlled in this fight, you basically have died because you're going to have to be killed. They're not going to be able to do anything about that. So yeah, TLDR, make sure if you're mind controlled, you're running through the orbs. If the person who ran through the orbs is not dead, then you have to finish them. Otherwise, they're going to get mind control permanently, and they're going to have to be killed. Another so the pros, the way they do this is that blue kind of tidal pool behind Lord Stormsong that we're eventually going to go down. It does damage to you. It does a lot of damage to you, actually. So the way that they do it is they just run into that pool, and there's a little bit of kind of you have to finick. It's a little bit finicky, but we're not going to talk about that today because unless you're doing a really hard key, you don't need to know this. So just be aware that if you cannot use the orbs for some reason, that is the other way to deal with it. So let's just go and kill the boss here. Pretty straightforward encounter. Otherwise, it's actually really nothing special. Just mind controls and those orbs. That's it. He's also going to do a dispel of the debuff healer, but I mean this spell it. Does a little bit of damage, but there's Wake in the Void. Now another nice thing about undermanning this is there's only going to be 2 of these orbs. So I mean that's not necessarily a good thing because when Cop gets mind controlled, it means he's only 2 of those orbs. But there it is there. Ancient Mind Bender, so you're going to run through those purple orbs. Make sure you hit all 5 of them. Ideally, there'll be 5. Right now, there's only 2. So now, you know, I wouldn't recommend doing that on a 0. It's not going to do any damage to you. So this is probably another big mistake that people are going to make here. They're going to start running around in circles. Just stand still and take damage. So we got him broken out. And another thing here is a lot of the times they're going to overlap with another set of those orbs. So the first one, it doesn't usually work out that way, but the second one almost always does. The second time people get mind control, there's going to be orbs out already, and probably about 35% of the way through the mind control, there's going to be another set of orbs spawning. And that's just the way the fight goes. So you would break the first set of 5, and then there would be another chance to break another set of 5 before your mind control is over, meaning you don't have to waste any damage on the person. Just be aware that at that point, depending on your keystone level, pretty good chance that you're going to actually have damaged them a little bit. And yeah, so there you go. You see it's lining up in a way that, yeah, ready for it. See what I got in that orb. So anyway, yeah, just be aware that usually you don't need 10 orbs. Let's put it that way. Almost never do you need 10 orbs. And that means probably like the 6th or 7th orb is going to break you. So if you continue to run through the orbs, you'll just die. But yeah, there you go. So you see Cop got mind control. It doesn't really matter on this level. I can just boss, but he becomes like he's no longer my friend, and that hurts, man. That really hurts.
I'm sorry, man. It wasn't my fault.
I know sometimes yeah, sometimes it's not our fault. I agree. All right, so anyway, now it's time to go to the last boss, and this boss is famous for many reasons, but one of the reasons is this the little area leading up to it. Okay, so these jellyfish are actually very dangerous. They don't do a lot of damage, but they stun you. And if you get too close to them, that's going to be a problem. It's going to stun you for 6 seconds. So yeah, I've lost many a key because of these, honestly. And it's harder than it's easier than it looks to get hit by them. So just play it really safe. Make sure you don't get stunned by these. They don't do much damage, but they will really kill your time if you got a couple people getting hit by them. Now so again, these are the eels I was talking about before. They're going to do basically not much, but they're going to put this massive debuff on the tank. And when you got, you know, a ton of them, you're going to get a ton of stacks of it. So what I'd really recommend is making sure you skip this first pack. And the way you do that, as you see, where's Cop? No. Okay, you swam right into them. All right, interesting choice. Anyway, yeah, so you want to not do that. You want to come up to the left there. I'll show him after we kill this pack. But as you see, I have this debuff on me already. Just ignore the conductive ink. That's from his trinket because he was mind controlled. But yeah, whoever they're attacking, they're going to do this Abyssal Strike. And it just does a ton of dot damage over time. And the more stacks you have, the more dangerous it is. So obviously you want to... you could AMS this, by the way. It's a debuff that does shadow damage, so it could be AMS. You want to take... But anyway, Cop, I'll show you how to skip this, all right? Okay. Come, hug the left here. And you see kind of like this little... it's almost like a little hole in the rocks here. That's your visual indicator. You want to just swim right through here. And you want to get up here, right here. You see how I'm kind of underneath rocks here? That's how you know you've done it. Easy as DK as well. I can just Path of Frost, and you just want to kind of cut from where we were right to there. You see this little gap in between these 2 rocks with a little bit of water here? That's the direct route you want to take. You do that, you'll skip the pack on the right. You skip the pack on the left. You do it wrong, you'll probably aggro the pack on the right, which isn't a bad thing. But if you aggro the pack on the left too, you've now just created hell for yourself. So just, you know, practice that. Make sure you know what you're doing there. Now these mobs here are direct correlations to the boss mechanics, so you're going to want to get your familiarity here. The Forgotten Denizen, the one on the right and the left, they are basically, they don't do anything. They just cast an extremely long spell, and if that spell gets off, it does a ton of damage to you. but it also heals them to full, literally full. No matter what health they're at, they will heal to full. I think that's 100% true. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not right about that. But either way, it heals them a ton. So don't let it go off. Now, this is why having interrupts is very, very important because when we do the encounter, you're going to see, but it's going to be paramount. If you don't do it right, you're never going to be able to kill the fight. The other mechanic, the other trash mob here is the Sunken Denizen. That's the one in the middle, Shaw-looking dude somehow, and it's just a tank guy. He just hits really, really, really hard, but he's slow as hell. Like you can literally kite without even having to try. So what I like to do is I like to mark the skull. I go in guns blazing, as they say. I'll get the first interrupt as it's an 8-second cast, so it's going to lock it out for a few seconds, and then it gives people time to get acclimated. Quickly burn down the first one, hopefully while DPS interrupts the other one. Otherwise, we're going to take some damage and waste some damage as well. And then after that, I'll kite. You know, now Cop's going to interrupt at the last second. That's perfect. He's going to finish off what's remaining, and that's it. Pretty easy. So, yeah, if you need to kite, go for it. Otherwise, if you're on a low key, you can not kite. It's up to you. Perfectly up to you. Doesn't really matter. A lot of people like to wait until the last second interrupt there, like both of us just did. But again, as somebody who's constantly thinking about the mistakes others might make, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. Even though it's the best way to maximize your CD of the interrupts, I don't think it's always the best way to do the encounter. So I wouldn't recommend it. I would interrupt as fast as possible just to make sure nobody let's put it this way. If you wait 7.5 seconds to interrupt that 8-second cast and 3 people interrupted it, you're wiped, right? So it's better to have somebody interrupt it mad early and, you know, kind of waste a little bit of their interrupt than to, then have 3 people interrupt the first cast and then wipe. So this fight is actually really straightforward. The problem is, as you see, his health pool is giant, and it's going to take a lot of damage to kill this boss because he's going to constantly make us leave. It's very similar to the Old Kingdom. Remember that dungeon, Cop?
Yeah, on Connect.
Yeah, that's the one. Last boss in there, almost identical to this boss strategically. He's going to separate us all from each other, and we're going to have to deal with mechanics. Only this time he's only going to separate the tank and the healer into one, and the 3 DPS into the other. Now, fun little fact, we did this with 5 tanks, and it is definitely based on roll. So if for some reason you're doing this with 5 tanks, you will all get sent to the one with the tank mob, and that thing is going to die really fast when you have 5 players attacking it. And then the other ones are just sat there. They're not doing anything because they have no targets to work on. So just in case you're ever doing this with 5 tanks, that's how it works. But yeah, if you're not, you're doing it with a normal group, the 3 DPS are going to get split up, and there's going to be one of those, whatever the caster mobs that we just fought there. One's going to be there, and one's going to be over here. Okay, so you're going to have to decide which one you're attacking first. If people split up and they don't deal with them quickly, you're not going to be able to interrupt both of them. Since you only have 3 people, you're going to need 4 interrupts if you don't kill the first one before the second cast gets off. But basically what you'd want, ideally you'd have 2 ranged, or 2 melee and 1 ranged. The 2 melee would take red, or more so they would take the one closest to where they spawn. So if the boss is on red side of the room, you'll start with red. If the boss is on skull side of the room, you'll start with skull. They take the closest one, and the ranged gets the interrupt on the far one. And by the time the second interrupt is needed on the far one, melee are over there, and whoever didn't interrupt first can get that. If that doesn't happen, and they have to use both their interrupts on the close one, then that just means that don't do any damage to red because you would have wasted your time. But the other problem on this fight is that one of the big strategy elements is that the healer gets this massive DPS buff, but every 10% of the DPS buff, he loses 10% of his health, something like that. So, yeah, it's a hell of a gamble. Let's put it this way. You're going to have 10% of your health by the end, 90% damage increase, I believe. So, yeah, you're going to be doing more damage than the damage healers by probably a lot. But if you take a single point in damage, you're going to get 1 shot. So there's a lot of unavoidable damage on this fight, and it's only unavoidable if you don't do it right, I mean to say. It is perfectly avoidable, but it's hard to avoid if you don't do the mechanics right. So if you're the healer and you don't know what you're doing with this, just dispel it. It's dispellable. I wouldn't recommend keeping it. If you know what you're doing, then you got to make sure that you have 2 interrupts downstairs, because what's going to happen very often is me and the healer are going to kill our ad at the same time as the second DPS ad is going to get its second cast off. Hopefully that's not too confusing. We'll kill our ad. say in 35 seconds, and then the cast is, you know, 2 8-second casts. So we'll basically get down there as the mob is finishing, right? You know what I mean? I don't know why it's 35 seconds. Obviously, that's not the right time, but you know what I mean.
Gotcha.
We would get down here as the second cast is going off. Healer gets one shot. This happens all the time, and it's definitely, if you can avoid it, you should. But if it's between killing the tank mob faster or slower just to avoid it, then do that for sure. It's better to keep the healer's debuff on him and not have him get one shot because you don't have enough damage or interrupts downstairs. Then, yeah, I don't know. Then the alternative, right? So the only other mechanic on the encounter is this giant purple circle. It's a silence, and it does a lot of damage if you're standing in it. Problem is, you're not going to be able to really see it when you're in the other room, quote unquote, like when you're in the nightmare phase. And when that phase ends, you just come back into the reality phase. So if you're standing in that void zone thingy, you'll be silenced and you'll be taking some damage. Well, guess what? If you're the healer who's got the debuff and you come out into that, well, that's that. You're one shot, right? So, yeah, there's a lot to think about here. The main thing is that the boss's energy pool is what's important. It's also these small little ads that are going to walk towards the boss. You want to either, basically, you just want to prevent them from getting to him, which you can do by damaging them. You can do by slowing them and kiting the boss. That's really a viable strategy as well. But yeah, every time they get to him, they restore a little bit of his energy. The big thing here you'll notice is the boss already has 60 energy. So that means that you're only going to get a couple seconds on the boss before he transitions into the nightmare phase thing. So you do not want to lust on the pull here. This is a very important damage target. And you do not want to waste Bloodlust. If you use Bloodlust on the pull and CDs on the pull, yeah, you made a big mistake here because you're going to have a lot of downtime without Bloodlust up. So, yeah, you know, maybe pop a minor CD on the pull, and then make sure you have a pot and big CDs for when the Bloodlust happens, which is that. So let's take a look at what it looks like. Pop, you'll get a chance to look at it. Just practice. I'm going to keep the boss by the red side. Okay, so just practice interrupting the red one. I don't know how long it's going to take to me to do my ad, but hopefully I'll come down, and by the time I'm down, the red ad will be dead. And we'll go over to the skull together and finish. That's what it would look like as a kind of a microcosm. There was 5 players. You know, most of the damage would be on the near one, and then they would switch to the other one. And the tank and the healer, they would break theirs out, and then come save the group. Pretty common that somebody dies as well, if especially with the Grievous. It's a real problem. Grievous is a very difficult Grievous fight because obviously the people cannot be healed while they're separated. So. There's that tentacle slap as well. You're going to want to dodge that. Another heavily avoidable mechanic. But if you get hit by it as a healer with debuff, you get one shot, right? So very easily to dodge. Stack pattern here. So there it is. Grasp of the Sunken City. Cop, you're alone down there. Kill the tank. I'm going to kill my denizen. Just make sure you wait as long as possible to interrupt. And yeah, by the time I've killed mine, I will be downstairs and. Yeah, I'm done with mine. Good. Alright, I'll interrupt this one then. It's almost done. And you also have this breath meter, which, I mean, if you're down here so long that you start to drown, then I'm not sure, maybe you're AFK or something. Okay, so this we're not going to be able to interrupt. Oh, actually we can, but we didn't do it. But yeah, that happens all the time when you get here with no interrupt because of a mistake or two. And, yeah, it's just going to waste your day. Another thing here is you have to actually interrupt. While you don't, the boss is absorbing a massive amount of damage. So if you're attacking the boss without interrupting it, then you're just wasting your own time. So don't lust until the boss is interrupted, but at this point is when you really lust. And under most circumstances, if you have really good damage, you can kill him in this phase. You should have plenty of time. And again, you'll want to slow, use things like Ring of Peace, prevent that those mobs from getting to him if you can. If you have really good damage, you can kill him in this phase. And that's the ideal goal. If you pull that off, you are really doing well. That's gonna save a lot of time, multiple minutes. But as you see, the ads are eventually gonna get to him. But yeah, it does look like we're actually gonna be able to kill him before he goes down. So, before he hits a 0. So, I don't know, but there you go. That's the fight. Usually, on like a tyrannical key, that's impossible. You're never gonna do that. On a fortified key, it's very doable. Just have to use your CDs well. Very doable. So, but on a tyrannical key, you're usually going to see probably 4 of those transitions total. 4 of the main phase, 3 of the ad phase.
Wow.
And on a fortified week, you're probably going to see 2. And yeah, if you see 2, you're really good. If you see 3, it's not the end of the world. Killing ads twice is not the end. be aware that the more times you kill ads, the more the fight's gonna take like an extra minute. That's it. What'd you think, man?
Oh, that's a very intense dungeon. A lot of really neat ways to mess up.
Yep, it's that's well said, because there's a lot of different ways that you could mess things up, and I think a lot of them are just going to be interrupted dependent. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
I'll tell you this. Whatever I joke about with classes, when we talk about Bombkin and Shadow Priest and these things, it's unfortunately you just can't bring a lot of range, regardless of how good these classes, certain classes are and are not. If you brought 3 melee, that's probably your best option here, because there's really no detriment to having more interrupts. It's just always a good thing in this dungeon. The more things you could interrupt, and the more coverage you have for interrupt mistakes, the better, because eventually somebody's going to make an interrupt mistake. It's just not going to happen where you're going to clear the whole dungeon without any interrupt mistakes unless you're really coordinated. So really good dungeon for Resto Shaman, really good dungeon for Prot Pally, because they bring extra interrupts out of their slots. Resto Shaman, of course, the only healer in the game with an interrupt, so that's really good. But yeah, 5 interrupts in the group, you'd be in really good shape. 3 interrupts in the group, you're probably okay. 2 interrupts in the group, you probably can't do it, frankly. You definitely need at least 2 DPS interrupts that are going to be up a lot, So this is a big problem when you bring Demo Warlocks, because they kind of refuse to interrupt, and I understand why, but you can't really refuse to interrupt in this dungeon, frankly. If you're going to refuse to interrupt, then you can't come. And a big problem with Shadow Priest and Bombkin as well, because they have really long interrupt CDs. Kind of same with Hunter. Really, the only good option for range is Ellie Shaman, So if you be an Ellie Shaman, you're going to pick them. Even an Enhanced Shaman is going to be better than probably a range. So, yeah, that's that. First boss is the Barometer. If you have a bunch of deaths on the first boss, probably just stop here, because the second and fourth boss are going to be so much more mechanically and focus intensive, I guess is the way to put it. That, yeah, if you mess up that first boss, you got 3 deaths on that first boss, probably not going to have a chance. So, one other thing that I just completely forgot to mention here is almost always you get to this last boss and you don't have count based on the skips that we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the case, you can pull the rest of these eels. They give a lot of mobs, but I think they give like something like 3.6% per pack only. Maybe not even that much. Maybe it's like 2 point something. They don't give a lot of count. So if you need more than like 9% when you get down here, it's going to be pretty close. I'm not very good at knowing the exact percentages. I should be, but I don't really. I just kind of go by feel. And if you pull every single one of these packs in here and you don't have count, that's GG. You're in serious trouble. So that would only have happened because you didn't follow my advice earlier in the dungeon. Basically, yeah, you're going to try to skip 3 different things. And if you do that, you should have exact count. But you can't skip 4 different things. So just keep that in mind. So any closing remarks?
No. It makes a lot more sense now that I understand where to go and that kind of thing. So
where to go? Yeah, that's...
Just getting to this room was impossible for me the last time I tried it. Let me put it to you that way. And I was stuck in the water, and when they pulled the last boss, apparently there's the same as the raid in this room. The water becomes deadly, and I died.
Yeah, that's a good point. If for any reason you want to die immediately, you can just run into the water while the boss is aggroed, and you'll pretty much get one shot. But yeah, this is actually this is the same room that you fight that boss in. Do you realize that?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I noticed that. I was like, yeah, this is the same one, because I remember all the wipes in this room.
Yep. All right, well, that's that. So, yeah, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, good luck with your shrine keys. They're very, very, very difficult on tyrannical weeks, but I feel like on fortified weeks, it's not very dangerous at all, as long as you have a mastery of interrupt. So, thanks for watching.
Peace. Cop out.